Okay, welcome to this episode of Kuden Radio. Dashi Halmigler here from Warrior Concepts. Of course, you already know that, unless you're brand new, in which case, there you go. Anyway, let's just jump right into this. This is a special launch. So, not that it's a special episode, or well, I guess it is, but it's not like our 100th, 200th, that kind of thing, right? So let's see if my dog tries to take down the place. Anyway, so let's just where do I start with this? This is actually coming out of some work that I did for an inner circle student coaching class last week. And I'll talk about that a little bit after we get started. But where do we want to go here? Most martial artists hear the word kuzushi, right? And think they already know what it means. Okay, breaking balance, right? It's a pretty common word across martial arts. If you're new to it, don't worry about it. I'll break it down a little bit more as we go. But yeah, like balance breaking, the thing you have to do, when you're setting up a throw or you're making a technique work. But what if that understanding is too small? What if it's just a hint at something much bigger, right? What if balance breaking isn't merely making someone stumble, right? What if it's causing structure to collapse in whatever way that's possible, right? What if that principle applies not only in combat, right, in self-defense, but also in relationships, in dependency, in guidance, and even in perceived freedom itself? So this episode begins a 3-part special mini-series that is an exploration into what I'm calling the hidden side of kuzushi. This is part 1, right? Hidden chains, hidden freedom, the hidden side of kuzushi. I think I'll leave it there. And we'll talk about this and more when we get started.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
And after 306 episodes, that's still my real story. Anyway, welcome back to Kuden. Dashi Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. And I am here, right, with my guy, Sensei James Alexander. He's in the wings, right? My producer, tech god, and translator of those who drop comments. Yeah, well, he speaks for you if you're commenting on the different platforms. He doesn't speak for those and filters them out for those who leave dumb shit, weird ass, non-relevant, or even bullshit damaging comments, whatever, right? They try to hijack the system, whatever. Anyway, right? So speaking of which, James, who is on already? Right? See the numbers going up. Who's on? Who says hi? Who's checking in? Who was in the wrong place? No, you wouldn't know if they were in the wrong place. So
Looks like Carrie Williams is on.
Awesome. Awesome.
Terrence, Kyle,
Terrence
Alan.
moved. Do you know Terrence moved, right?
Yeah.
Terrence, yeah. So every once in a while this happens. And there was a mom of a youth student in class tonight, who like was looking at Terrence like, wait, where'd you move from? And he goes, Richmond, Virginia Beach, that kind of thing. And she goes, you moved here? Why'd you move here? And almost at the same time, we're like, for the training. And she goes, really? Yeah. Some people actually, believe it or not, right, travel to go to seminars, and other people, right, temporarily or permanently or whatever, actually move to be closer to their teacher. So tonight was his first official class. So tonight he experienced things that you can't experience on the other end of a Zoom call. Anyway, all right. So Terrence is on. Who else?
Kyle, Alan.
Awesome. Part of my Japan crew.
World 199. Richard, Trinity, and Lori.
Awesome. Some of our regular motley crew and a few other new names. I'm not going to become a CIA like decoder or anything like that to figure out what some of the names are, but we'll let that go with that. So anyway, we're moving to the summer. That's good, right? We've got our Japan trip coming up here in just a couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, on our lesson plan, we always do pre-departure classes. So it eases up students' anxiety, right, about things being off. It also allows me to make sure that I cover etiquette that they would want me to cover at Hombu, because far too many people go to Japan and don't give it much thought, or do dumb things that get passed around the martial arts as standard everyday things. You know what I'm talking about, James, right? Like that os thing, don't do that, guys. When you go to Japan, don't do that. Okay, I don't give a shit if you have a Japanese teacher who does it. That is low class language. It's usually done between very, very close friends, out of earshot of other people, and it's just, it's not even like yeah, right? You have yes, sir, you have yeah, right, and then you have kind of thing, right? It's things just get grabbed on, like these different bowing methods, right? I just, we'll leave it alone. Anyway, so, but let's see, not tomorrow. We do them on Wednesday. Wednesday, so that'll be week 3, right? So we're covering like food and packing needs and all that. We've already been through etiquette and travel and in country travel arrangements and communications and all that kind of stuff. So so then we have Wednesday, then we have next week's, which will be our final prep, all that kind of stuff. Oh, we've been doing some Japanese, not just etiquette, but also some helpful Japanese language phrases and whatnot, just so people don't come across as the typical gaijin visiting Japan. Anyway, so let's see, we have that. Let's see, so next Wednesday, and then the following Monday, we are in the air on our way for a 2-week. It will not be a vacation. I've warned everybody again and again and again. Not a vacation. Okay, the whole thing's a damn training trip. So anyway, cool stuff. And then after we get back on the 25th, which is actually our Memorial Day. And then a couple of weeks later, we have our spring Ninjutsu training camp. And the theme for this one, normally I do a Japan recap seminar after we get back, and I share a bunch of stuff that we learned and different techniques from different teachers and whatnot. For those who couldn't go but still want to get some of it. But because of scheduling and all that, the theme for our spring camp will be Japan recap. So if you go to the page or you go to the event page on onlineninjaacademy.com, I don't even know if I think I have a placeholder there, but where I would normally have, you're going to learn these things. I don't have anything there because I don't know what we're going to learn yet. So when I know, you'll know. I'll probably have some placeholders in that are general enough in nature, but once we're in country and the training begins and all that, and I have some things that kind of stand out, then from there I will update that page on the fly. Now there's some other things before we go, and this is going to affect Kuden. It's going to affect Whiteboard Wednesday. It's even going to affect my folks that are in like my Nimpo Masterclass and coaching things and whatnot, because of the 13-hour time difference between Eastern Daylight Time and Japan. So right now it is, let's see, it's 8:16 p.m. Eastern as I'm speaking at the moment, which makes it 9:16 in the morning tomorrow morning in Japan. So between that and our travel and class schedule and whatnot, it just turns into a logistical nightmare. So what I will be doing, and I'll be sending out, if you're on the email list or you follow us or our friends on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, any places like that, I'll be posting some things. I'll also be sending out some more detailed emails to folks before we go to kind of explain how I will be keeping lessons flowing. And while there won't be full episodes for Kuden, we'll be doing little insights or recaps and things like that. Obviously, no physical demonstration, but little things that way. So, yeah. And then I have some senior instructors and whatnot that will be covering classes at the dojo. We'll make sure that the Nimpo Masterclass things continue as they should. Yeah. So it'll be good, right? It'll be good. Anyway, that being said, anybody else jump in, James? I didn't see the numbers change too much. No?
No.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, in that case, let me bring up my notes here and jump into things, right? So if you were on early, then you probably already heard me say this. If not, don't worry about it. But as I said before the intro, tonight, this episode begins a 3-part exploration into what I am calling the hidden side of kuzushi, what most people call balance breaking, right? And that's not correct. And I know lots of Japanese martial arts use the term. Well, I'll explain as we go along, right? These 3 episodes, right? These 3 episodes, actually based on some work and insights that came out of and ended up in my notes for a recent inner circle coaching class that I had with my personal students last week, right? But during that class, we just stayed focused on the physical side of things, right? This episode and the next 2 is everything that wasn't physical. Okay. What most people think of, right? Martial arts wise and whatnot. Okay. Again, I'll get into these things in a minute, right? But again, I didn't cover these things, and frankly, I couldn't cover them in the context of that class. So here we are, right? This is part 1, right? I'm calling this Hidden Chains, Hidden Freedom, right? And it's about the hidden side of kuzushi, right? Now, most people think there's Omote and there's Ura, and Ura is the hidden side. Next episode is, it's not Ura, right? If we're talking about this being the hidden side, then what is the obvious, right? This is the Omote, right? This is the surface level, easy to see stuff, right? But just to make sure that everyone's on the same proverbial sheet of music, as we would say here in the States, we'll start with where I believe most people are when thinking about this subject, right? When thinking about kuzushi, right? So yeah, let's just get into it, right? Let's start with a statement that Hatsumi Sensei was known to make. I'm using a direct quote, but he said this many different times, many different ways, right? Don't copy me, copy the feeling, right? And in, usual fashion, people smile, they nod knowingly. Yes, we understand, Sensei. Okay. And there was even a book that was written that had these things. Hatsumi Sensei would ask at least for decades, he didn't so much toward the end. He kind of might say a word or whatever and then make a gesture or whatever. But in the early stages, there were these three words that went together, right? Understand, good, play. And of course, people parroted that like they knew what the hell he was talking about and whatever, right? But he would always ask that, right? Do you understand? Of course, people nod, right? But what he was really asking was not just do you understand, but like, do you understand clearly, right? Any questions? Okay. And then when people nodded, right? Because he expected people to be adults, right? If you have a question, if you need clarity, ask, right? More than once in Japan, he would say, understand, after demonstrating something or explaining something. And I can feel myself doing it. I just kind of lean my head to the side, squint a little bit, like, I think so. And he'd look over and point at me and just laugh, right? Because he knew, right? Work with it a little bit. And then that might end up being a sidebar conversation at some point, or a little extra lesson as I was thanking him because we were leaving, and that was our last class, and we were heading out. And he'd turn me around and point to one of the scrolls or whatever on the wall and give me, whatever. But I'm willing to admit that, right? Or, after a class with one of the master teachers, and I got the senseis now, it's okay. So, but then he was one of the daishihan. So he covering something in class, and I think I have it, but it's just not. There's something off. So I'd go up and either ask for clarity, or I would say, "This is how I'm understanding it. Like, am I close?" And he would either acknowledge it, or he would try to give me another explanation, or he would just, if it was difficult to explain in language, then he would just say it's difficult. Just keep working on it. Okay, right. But here's this question, right? Understand, right? And when people nodded, he just said, "Good." Okay, because if you're nodding, yes, and you're not asking any questions, okay, good, you understand. Okay, go play, right? Go work on it. Go figure it out. Okay? He wasn't, wasn't going to force feed things, right? But that phrase, right? Don't copy me, copy the feeling. Okay. I have come to believe or understand or see that may be one of the deepest warnings against dependency I've ever heard spoken in the martial arts. Okay? It's something I've covered recently, right? Regarding part of a teacher's job, right? That being to make sure that you can continue your training in his or her absence, right? Temporarily, right? Because you're away from training, or permanently, right? Teacher dies, whatever. Okay. You're going to have to do it anyway once you become a teacher, unless we slip into arrogance and, believe that we know everything, and then training really stops. But anyway, that's a different topic, right? So again, right? He said, don't copy me, copy the feeling, right? Not depend on me, not imitate me, right? Find the living principle, right? And this episode is my attempt to hint at just that. Okay? All right. Before we hit the first topic or the first part of this, right? And and again, I'm going to do this from a surface level, deeper and deeper as we go. And I'm going to take this through the 3 levels of transmission, right? Taiden, Kuden, Shinden. Right? Taiden, talk about the body side, the physical side, as most people approach it. Take it a level deeper into the Kuden, right? Understanding it in a broader sense so we can get to the principle, right? And then a little bit of Shinden, the heart transmission. Hopefully the whole thing will be a lot of Shinden as well, because the Shinden level is really about understanding, it's not a teacher telling you what to think, right? It's studying your teacher and paying attention to how they do things, how they think, how they get to certain things, connections that they make, how they look at problems, how they solve problems, how they approach things, that kind of thing, right? Not just the physical life, right? Anyway, so one last call, James. Anybody else sign in? Anybody else say hi? Anybody running fashionably late?
Just Bridget Serrani said good evening.
Oh, cool. Good evening. Okay, so let's start with this. I mentioned it earlier. Kuzushi is more than breaking balance, right? One of the things that causes students more trouble than almost anything else is thinking they have Kuzushi when they do not, right? They make a partner bend, lean, twist, maybe even stumble, and think, I've taken balance, right? Often, they've only just moved him around, right? Often, they've only displaced him, right? Again, just moving him around, right? And this is where I remind students, right? And this is going to sound super simple because we all know it, but often we don't act like it. Okay? This is not my words. These are words from my teachers coming forward. Okay? And that reminder to students is we're bipeds, right? You know what that means, right? We only have 2 points of contact with the ground. We're not 3-legged stools. We're not a 4-legged dog, whatever. Okay? But that's not the obvious part. Okay? That's like so stupidly simple, it should go without saying. But we're bipeds, right? But what does that mean? What that means is we're in a constant state of shifting balance all the time. Okay? To move, most people break their own balance to get started. Okay? Standing itself is dynamic correction all the time. Okay? It's not static stability. Right? If we stopped firing muscles necessary to keep the structure where it is, and we stopped firing muscles that were countering the effect of gravity on us, we'd collapse. Right? So again, standing itself, right? It's constant correction, right? Against this shifting balance. Every time we breathe. Anybody that's ever shot a firearm, okay, or a bow and arrow, anything like that, right? Knows that simple breathing causes this movement. Turning and looking down, right? This is a 7 or 8 pound weight on top of people's neck and shoulders. Right? Hopefully it's balanced on a regular basis, right? Ears in line with shoulders, shoulders in line with hips, hips in line with feet, a specific point on the feet, just forward of the ankles. If it's not, well, then other muscles opposite that direction fire without us even thinking about it. Fire so that we don't fall down, so that we don't stumble. Okay. The body is constantly correcting these things. Okay. The body and the brain are self-correcting all the time. We just don't know it. We don't feel it unless we actually take the time to explore it. Right. Micro adjustments constantly. Right. So here's the thing. Getting your partner to step, yeah, that may be a balance break of sorts, but it's often one the system easily corrects for. Right? Most people, Hatsumi Sensei said way back in the early days when we were focusing on the shoe level of training, because he took us through was it a series of, or a set of 3 blocks of 5-year training for those of us that started early on. So most people would focus on the theme, right? Like this year we're working on short sword and spear and whatever, right? But the way he taught, right? We got a 5-year block of mechanical specifics, shoe, right? We had a 5-year block, right? At the Ha stage where a lot of it was on, the whole thing was on variation and different ways to break the form to discover what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. And then there was a block of it. You get the idea, right? But during that first stage, he would very often say, most people never learned how to walk. Okay. What he meant by that was the legs carrying the torso from point to point, not the torso shifting and the foot getting out under it to catch it. Right? He said most people don't walk. Right? Most people don't use their legs to carry their body from point to point. Most people are in a controlled state of falling. And as long as they're in that state, taijutsu is going to be very difficult, if possible at all. Okay, it's very different, right? But these things are really, really easy to overlook because, well, shit, I've been walking since have we really been walking? Have we really been carrying our torso and our head on our hips and legs, right? Since we were 2 or 3? Or have we just gotten really, really, really good at controlling our balance in the direction we want to go so we don't fall down? Have the legs been carrying, or have the legs been catching up or keeping up? He would often remind us to be careful of what we thought we knew. Yeah. So anyway, but again, doing something to get our partner to step, not much different than his system corrects for all the time. Okay. And this is what students miss, right? I did for a long time. So this is not me on a pedestal. This is sharing, right? Insights, right? What's often missed is that a step does not necessarily mean collapse. Often it just means recovery. The body's constantly recovering. Okay? Counter shifting, muscles firing, that kind of thing, right? If you know how to do osoto nage or ganseki nage or whatever, as a part of that basic level training of the step-by-step movement, right? Not just trying to copy the guy who's doing a violent throw on a YouTube video or whatever, right? But I mean, exploring the structure, the mechanical, the movement of your body, his body parts, those kind of things, right? Often the first part, like in an osoto nage, the great outer throw. Most people call it a rear hip throw. There's a push on the far shoulder. There's a pull on the leading arm, the one closest to you. Can be lateral. It can be lateral and down. And then there's a step, right? And as a part of that, more often than not, their far side, the one leg away from you, not the one close that you're going to check, will step, right? Then you step in and then you turn and that throws them and whatnot, right? But that step, does it mean that you broke his balance? Yeah, for like a microsecond. But what did his brain do? Didn't even have to know where the ground was. Just move the foot so it would land and catch the body. The moment that foot touches down, balance has been caught. Doesn't matter if he's bent. Doesn't matter if he's twisted. Right? Doesn't matter if your partner's holding themselves there. If you two could let go of each other and you could take a step away and they stay in that form, they're not off balance. Okay? And this is a very important difference because sometimes students think he stepped, I got Kuzushi, right? I broke his balance. Maybe. Okay? Maybe he just did what a healthy nervous system is designed to do. Save itself. Okay? Correct. Recover, right? Which means that the question is not, can I make him step? But can I put the step in the wrong place? Can I allow the body to do what it normally does, but when it gets where it's going, it's wrong? Can I prevent the next correction? Can I interrupt recovery itself? Okay. Now we're getting closer. Okay. Now, this is not a Taiden training, right? We're not in the dojo. You're not even on Zoom watching us demonstrate in physical class, right? I'm just a guy teaching on a topic. Okay. I'm talking about the tight end, but we're not doing tight end training. The longer you've been around, you might be able to make these connections and whatever, right? If not, well, then you'll need to get with somebody who really knows what they're doing to literally walk you through these things, right? But here's the thing, right? Can I put that step, that saving step, right, in the wrong place in the moment the throw occurs? Can I prevent the next correction, right? Can I interrupt recovery itself? Okay. Again, we're getting closer. Because real Kuzushi, and we'll talk about what that means here shortly, like the word itself, right? Because balance breaking is not a direct translation. Okay? It's at best an expedient placeholder for something that's way more than just a word or its translation. Okay. But real Kuzushi, what the word is pointing to, the actual skill set we're supposed to be developing, right, is usually not found in causing the step, but in what happens when his natural correction fails. Okay. And that's a much deeper lesson. It's a much more intricate skill set, okay, that involves not just pushing and pulling and moving somebody and causing the step to happen, but knowing how to adjust that, right? How to adjust mid-step so that when he lands, he's in a worse position than he was when he just naturally stepped to correct, right? It has more to do with timing, angling, right? Flow, uke, like not uke nagash, uke, receiving, feeling what's going on, right? Again, I'll talk about more of this as we keep going, right? But again, it's a much deeper lesson. And because students mistake simple displacement for actual collapse, There's a reason I'm using that word. Okay. Because they mistake those two. What do human beings normally do? We revert to the cave, right? We start forcing technique, right? Pushing harder, pulling harder, muscling the throw or whatever we're trying to do, and getting more and more stuck. Okay. And because they think they have kuzushi, because their partner's body is bent or because the step happened or whatever, again, they begin forcing technique. Okay. They, they try going faster, try going harder, whatever. Okay. And my students that have been with me for a while, that they probably heard this, and so much that they're going to smile because they remember hearing it, or they're going to want to throw up because they're tired of hearing it. When I see this shit going on in the dojo, right, one of my most common phrases is doing something that's wrong faster or harder doesn't make it right. It makes it wrong faster and harder. Could you luck out and have it work? Sure. But how often does it work? Right? If you try something 10 times and it worked 5, that's still wrong 5 times. Right? How do we increase the number of right times? Now, if you're doing something 10 times and you have it right 8 or 9 times at whatever speed you're working on, out of that 10, I'm good with that. Because even being a whiz bang at this stuff, that's a technical term, on the street against somebody who's actually trying to beat, break, or kill you, and they're not an uke, they're not. Yeah, that's why we have adaptation. That's why we have henka. That's why we have the ability to recover or change techniques on the fly, because for whatever reason, he jammed it up. For whatever reason, it didn't work. Okay, you misread something. He caught you. His skill set's better, or whatever. Right? He's drunk, and it's not easy to get things the same way we normally would. Right? But the real question is not, does he look off balance? Right? Whatever the hell that means, because I'm going to talk about something that Hatsumi Sensei taught us how to do. That the person doesn't look like they're off balance at all, and yet they're absolutely off balance, and in more than one way. Okay, so the question isn't, does he look off balance? The real question is, has he lost the ability to attack, defend, recover, escape, counter, or in any other way save himself in that moment? Okay. Because if you can do any of those things, right, then you may not yet have kuzushi. Right? And that's a very different standard than just, did I bend him or did I move him in a way where he had to step? Okay. Which leads us to taking a look at what kuzushi actually means. What does the word kuzushi actually mean? Okay. So, and you can look up the kanji and whatnot, but kuzushi comes from the root verb kuzusu, Kuzusu. You can look that up, right? If you just look up the kanji for, okay. And remember, the kanji are borrowed from Chinese, and then given certain translations, pronunciations, those kind of things. Some are Japanese transliterations of the way the Chinese would pronounce it, like nin in Japanese is ning, right? Really close, right? In Chinese, the perseverance, endurance, that kind of thing. But there's also a Japanese reading that the Japanese assigned a word to it, like the nin symbol that we know for ninja, perseverance, those kind of things, right? Is all in Japanese. The word is shinobu, right? That has to do with stealth and entering and those kind of things, right? So we have ninja on one side, right? A persevering, enduring person. But on the other side, we've got a shinobi. That is a person who is stealthy or one who enters and that kind of thing, right? So again, you have the same kind of thing going on here. But if we take a moment, if you, and you can look it up because I have to present this from the perspective of knowing that most of our listeners will eventually be uh, in the audio only realm, on Spotify or Pandora or wherever folks are listening in, right? So not going to bother to bring up the kanji. Everybody can look it up. Okay. So, but if we break this down, right, kuzushi, right, you'll see the kanji for kuzusu, right, and actually the Japanese would still add an extra piece to the end of it, right? This kana for su or tsu, okay, and it just points to the fact that it's the verb form, okay. Kuzushi, the noun form, right, because it's something, right, would have a it kind of looks like a fish hook, right? It's pronounced shi, right? Kuzushi. So kuzusu becomes kuzushi. Not getting you a Japanese lesson. Just if you see these things, what matters is the kanji itself, not these kana at the end, okay? And you'll know you have the right kanji because it looks like the base of it, the lower part looks like a duplication, right? Looks like two kanji, or a duplication of the kanji for moon, right? But in this context, this is not a duplication, right? This is not like um, the kanji for forest, which is literally the kanji for tree that is in triplicate. There's two on the bottom, one on top, and then now it means trees, hence forest or woods or that kind of thing. It's not this. When these things are seen together, um, it does mean a pairing, but it's a word in and of itself. Okay. And then on top of that, it could look to some people like a crown, right? But what it actually is a compressed version of the kanji for mountain. Okay. Yama or san or zan, right? Yama. Okay. So what you have, what it's really pointing to is this radical, right? This radical for mountain that's on top. Okay. And so the kanji below it, right, can be pronounced tomo or o or on. But tomo is the word in tomodachi for friends, right? Tomo can mean friends, partnership, um, uh, can imply sharing the load, those kind of things, all right? So this is an important piece because this is supporting the mountain. And what the kanji is pointing to is if that, whatever that is, structure, base, elements, whatever it is that allows for a mountain to be strong, immovable, right? That kind of thing. If that is weak or it's crumbling or it's missing or it's not what it should be, the mountain will fall. The mountain will crumble. Okay. So again, Kazushi is often translated as breaking balance. It's not incorrect. It's just too small. Okay. Because that kanji for Kazusu, right, means to collapse, to crumble, to dismantle, to lose structural integrity. Can also mean to cause something that was structurally stable to lose whatever is necessary to make that thing stable, to make it structurally stable, to lose what's necessary. Okay. And this is used in everyday terms as well. Okay. Like if somebody lost um, the money necessary to maintain their lifestyle, that's Kazusu. Okay. That is a loss of structure and like shit's going to collapse. Everything's crumbling around them. Right? If somebody that's likes to jog and run, or they're very fit and they're an athlete and stuff like that, and they lose a leg. Okay. Doesn't mean that science can't help out, doesn't mean that medicine can't help, doesn't mean they can't get a prosthetic, but they're going to need to go through a shit ton of training to get back to anywhere close to what they were before. Right. Okay. And that definition, that changes everything. This is not just a matter of breaking balance. Right? We have to be careful with super simplistic or overly simplistic definitions. Right? Trying to be a ninja. Well, what the hell is that? I mean, if we don't get down to the root of what the kanji that were selected to even mean this, right? Jin is a person. Great. Nin, to endure, to persevere, to keep going when the shit goes sideways, right? To be able to endure and persevere when everything else would crumble around you. Not the same. Not the same. And that's actually a higher order than shinobi. One who enters stealthily, that kind of thing. It's a part of it, but way deeper. Okay? The Chinese readings are always closer to the essential nature of what's being talked about, what's being discussed. Okay. So Kuzushi is not simply making someone wobble or have to step. It's causing structure to collapse. And not in a simple way, right? Not posture alone. Structure. Okay. And that includes spine, the ability to step, the ability to recover, the ability to take ukemi, and even perhaps the ability to choose correctly, to make proper decisions, okay? To have the freedom to move in whatever direction is necessary to achieve whatever goal is at hand or to solve whatever problems at hand. Interesting. I think so anyway. Right? Because now Kuzushi begins sounding much larger than throwing or just getting somebody to stumble or step. Okay? And that's where this episode, our 3-part mini series on the topic, begins. Okay? And this is where I often tell students something that sometimes surprises them. Okay? When it comes to like throwing or doing techniques like that, right? What I say is stop thinking of throws, as literally tossing someone, right? Especially in the conventional sense, the way people think of that in the context of judo or jujitsu or whatever. Okay. Do we have them? Sure. But even then, it's not the same. It's more about causing somebody to spring than anything else. And again, introductory techniques, beginner level techniques, it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole story. Okay. Especially when we think of this in the conventional sense, because that often causes the force that people use. Okay. Because they're trying to be somebody. They're trying to do something. Okay? They're trying to, win, dominate, overcome. Are they wrong? No. But it's not this level of training. It's not what's being passed on. People think I have to throw him. I have to launch him. I have to project him, right? Toss him, whatever, right? And that already interferes, right? That already confuses. It already warps what's really going on. Okay? So instead, right, think of creating a situation where he can no longer stand. Right? That's what I tell students, right? We don't throw people. We cause a condition or a situation where he can no longer stand up. Okay? Or he can't recover because he's not he's in a controlled state of falling. It's just that he's not in control. We're controlling it or guiding it or redirecting it. Right? It's very different. So the question isn't how do I throw him? The question is how do I make standing impossible? How do I guide a collapsing human structure? That changes everything. Right? Because when you get that, now you stop trying to hurl a person, right? And you begin learning to go along with the collapse, right? Guiding the collapse, almost escorting him into where you want him to go or where his structure is already going. Okay. That's much closer to real Kuzushi. Like I said, I tell students, don't think throw, think make standing impossible, make catching himself or recovering extremely difficult, if not impossible, right? Make movement and correction difficult. Okay. And what I find is that those who understand that, who get it, right, that eases the tendency to lean into force or, the typical martial arty kind of thing, right? And it brings attention back to where it belongs on structure. Okay. It's where it's supposed to be. Okay. Before I share a little moment here from a recent class, James, any questions, comments, anything like that pop up?
Just one from Snake and Eggs over on YouTube.
Snake and eggs? Not steak and eggs. Snake and eggs.
Snake and Eggs.
You guys slay me. Right. Anyway, cool.
He said, this is coming from a new practitioner's perspective, so take it as you will.
Of course.
The few times I've broken my opponent's balance when executing a technique, it felt like walking through the UK.
Oh, yeah. Hold on to that. That description when you actually felt that, because there's a moment, there's a feel to that. Okay. I describe it. So my peers and I describe this using different words, but that's cool. Right. We'll see if they kind of mesh up or whatever, but yeah, hold on to that. I don't care what words you use to describe it. What it really comes down to is, and again, not my words, master teacher's words, Soke's words, right? If it feels like you're working, regardless of whether you get the technique right or not, if it feels like you're working, one, you are, and two, it's not needed to. James, you've heard me say that in class, right? Okay. And because, anybody can win if you got the bigger army, or even you got the same size army, but you got to jump on the guy. Okay. I'm not saying you can't win that way. I got a quote from Nagato Sensei where he said, yeah, you could win, right? But don't confuse winning, taking that route, right? The route of work, right? Don't confuse that with like doing this versus fighting like everybody else. All right. And I know that flies in the face of a quote that everybody likes to pass around on the internet, right? That Hatsumi Sensei was quoted as saying, if you do something and it works, or if you do something and you win, that's ninjutsu. It's the problem with taking a soundbite or a snippet out of a lesson that has much more context, right? And then just making that the thing, right? And we should all be wary of this kind of stuff. It happens all the time, right? I don't care which side of the political aisle you're on. I don't care which side of the woke thing you're on. I don't care, right? What everybody should be aware of, otherwise you're operating from a position of unbalance, is that the algorithms on these different sites, news sites, social platforms and all that are designed to show you more of what you already click on the most. And now, because your camera is always on, what you look at or pause on for any length of time. I can get my sites and whatnot. If I want to come back to something, or if I wanted to remind me of something, let's say I saw a cool shirt that, well, that's pretty neat. That's pretty interesting. Wow. But I'm not in a buying mood, right? Or I'm not sure that I want this one or whatever, right? I already know. I'll just click on it or hover on it long enough, or let a video play long enough, about 30 seconds. Actually, sometimes it's 10 to 12, where it programs the system to remind me of that thing on a regular basis. I don't even need to bookmark shit anymore. Okay. But be careful what you click on, because it'll keep showing you the same thing. And then you end up in your own self-induced echo chamber, which we'll talk about more next episode. People think that they're actually clear thinking, independent, straight. Nope. Yeah, we absolutely, especially using technology, absolutely have to be careful, because the research that people are doing now is nowhere close to what unbiased, peer-reviewed research originally started out to be before technology was helping. And I don't mean AI. I'm talking about the way the algorithms, the computer programs that track you and take stock of what you like and whatnot, to keep feeding you the same shit. It becomes less and less unbiased. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Okay. And besides that, ego likes it anyway, so why not, right? It just makes you easier to sway, which makes you less and less ninja-like, free thinker. Okay. But it leaves you thinking that you are. That's ninja no uge, right? Makes us easier to deceive, to manipulate, and more likely to argue that we're not. Interesting. Anyway. All right, James, anything else?
Just Dave checked in, so he was
Cool.
running late today.
It's probably the work, probably the damn man he has to work for. Anyway. All right, let me get back over to my notes. All right, so to continue on with this, right? I described to students during a recent class, right? And this fits perfectly with the question that came in. When kuzushi is really there, right? When collapse actually occurs, there's often this strange moment. It's like a second, but it can feel longer than that, right? Where the attacker or Yuruke, whoever, right? In that moment, they no longer feel heavy or resistant, even if they're stiffening up to resist, right? Or they're trying to go with the technique or whatever, right? When kuzushi actually happens, it almost feels, and this is my description, right? And several of my peers use the same one, but it almost feels like they're floating. It almost feels like they're hovering or they're suspended. And again, it's just for a second, half second, microsecond before they drop, right? And many of you know exactly what I mean. Okay. They could be holding on tighter. They could be firing all kinds of muscles to not fall down, all kinds of things. But when you actually broke the structure, when you actually caused things to collapse, all of those things, that holding on more tightly, that resisting, and all that kind of stuff, actually feeds the technique. It actually causes the structure to collapse more, because what's necessary for the work to be done, for the resistance to be successful, for the gripping and whatnot to actually work is gone, right? And this is what we're studying. Okay. not how to do a move. The move works because of this thing, right? Of course, in the beginning, right, we learn the moves. We learn step-by-step moves. We learn techniques and those kind of things. But we learn them so we can learn these other things. The structure, the technique is a tool. It's a teaching tool. It's a way into learning these things, balance, timing, distance, those kind of things that are, for all intents and purposes, invisible, right? So there's an interesting phrase in Mikyo in one of these teachings, right? It's called the Heart Sutra, that points to like the form and the formless, right? That emptiness is form, form is emptiness, emptiness is, could be void, could be however, right? But what it's really pointing to is that they're both the same thing, but we need the form to see the emptiness. Okay, we need in Taoism, there's the lesson of the uncarved block, right? But you can't describe the block, the edges of the block or whatever, without reference points around it. If we drilled a hole in the block, right? The way we describe the hole, you can't describe the hole. You describe the border, right? You can't describe what's not there. So we use reference points around it. So is it a big hole or a small hole? Depends on the size of the block. If we took a 1-inch drill bit and drilled a hole in the block, it's not saying anything unless I know the size of the block. Okay. If that block is 2 inches by 2 inches, square, cube, right? And I drill a 1-inch hole in it, it's going to look very different than if I drill a 1-inch hole in a block that's a foot by a foot by a foot cubic. Now we'd look at that and go, that's a small hole. Okay. Because it's all relative. Right. But anyway, so again, that collapse of structure, that feeling where everything just went away. Like the one listener said that it just feels like you're just walking right through the person. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm describing as hovering or floating or whatever, it's that same thing. Everything is gone. This guy can be fighting like hell. And it not only doesn't help him, it actually just feeds the technique, right? And what my experience is, and this is why we have techniques like taki otoshi, right? Not take, taki, waterfall drop, okay? Where you move a person into a position and create a moment. You create that collapse, and you can literally walk out from under them during that moment where they're hovering. You can walk out from under them and they'll hang out quarter of a second. It's probably less, but it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like that to them. Okay. That tension causes that surprise in them, causes a suspension, and then they just drop. So waterfall drop is not about water flowing. It's about that once a unit of water crests that ledge, gravity has it. There's nothing it can do until it gets grounded. Okay. So that's a very different feel from simply bending someone over or forcing them down or into a throw. Okay. What I'm talking about is often where the throw is already happening before he hits the ground. Okay. And that's one of the things many students often miss, right? And this is not about blaming students for missing, because if we don't know what the hell to look for, if we don't know what we're looking for, then we'll never see it. Okay. So it's not just one of the things that students miss. It's one of the things that many students aren't guided to see or look for, because the person that's teaching them, and I'm not knocking any teachers, but it is true that some people, they start teaching way too soon, or they teach something they really don't understand, or they're teaching at a level that they do understand, but it's not this, right? And so that person can't possibly guide others to see or to look for this thing. Okay. But this leads us to something else. And I mentioned it earlier, right? Something that Hatsumi Sensei teaches on a very high level. And if we're not careful, we're going to miss it. We don't understand it. We don't understand how the person's just standing there. How the fuck, right? If he came at me with that shuto, man, I would just move, or I would block, or no, you wouldn't. Okay. Because again, we're going on appearances. And this is why it's problematic to only learn from video lessons. Huh? I didn't have video. I had books and picture sequences, but I also went to seminars, spent 2 days, 3 days, a week, whatever, filling up notebooks with things, right? Going to Japan for 2 weeks, filling up notebooks, getting the experience, and then coming back and working through things, right? But to just get it two-dimensionally, and I get it. Some people, they can't afford it, or they won't venture out or whatever, right? Again, we'll talk about some of those things next episode. But so you do the best you can with what you have, but you also have to understand that there's missing pieces. There's also missing pieces if we're in a dojo. Because I know the argument is dojo training is best. Yeah, well, it comes with its own inherent problems as well. Talk about those shortly. Because it's all about balance. It's all about understanding where we might be putting ourselves in a condition and not know it, because like it looks normal, it feels normal. The way I think positions it as normal. Okay, like if honey ain't happy, nobody's happy, or I'd rather be happy than alone, or those kind of fucking statements that people make, right? When really what they're doing is just abdicating, right? They don't want to argue, they don't want to fight or whatever, but they don't want to be alone either. That kind of thing. That's right. People make that as a normal thing. And so many people have done it that it's just that, well, if honey ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, has just become like a normal thing. Well, shit. Sounds to me like somebody just handcuffed themselves to a condition, and now they're trying to accomplish goals or solve problems from a chained or caged position. But that's just me. And yes, I'm married. And yes, we have a really great thing. Two very independent people that we're not making it work. There's understanding balance and understanding dependency, codependency, and independence, and how they work. I'll talk about that here shortly. Anyway, but first let's talk about this like really advanced, almost, it's not a secret. I hate using that word too. It's advanced lesson from Hatsumi Sensei, right? That even making your opponent fall may not be enough, right? Because falling may still allow recovery. Just like when I shift him and he takes a step, right? I can knock him down, but he can recover, right? We know this. It's called ukemi, right? Saving himself. Because if he can take ukemi, even if he can't roll out, if he can take ukemi, he's now down at your fucking legs, right? His weapon or whatever is at your support system all the way up to the groin, right? On his way down, he could snag you, break your balance. This is all intermediate and advanced work. Okay. The lessons are there as long as we're not always just looking at things as the Omote, like, oh, look, here's another skill that can make me invincible. Here's another skill that can make me invincible. Here's another technique that's cool and can break him, but make me invincible. No. Okay. We haven't mastered any given skill, throwing any particular weapon, ukemi, anything like that, until we also know how to beat it. So let's not further delude ourselves. Okay. Let's remove ourselves from the thinking of the masses. Okay. So, yeah, this is taking it one step farther than him catching himself with a step. You knocked him down. Great. Right. You completed the throw or the joint lock or whatever. Great. Okay. Except he took ukemi and he saved himself. Right. Which is why in advanced work, during collapse, right, the next thing you learn after you learn the throw and your partners learn to take ukemi, right, the next thing is during that collapse, before he's able to take ukemi, we disrupt his ability to take ukemi. Before he makes it to the ground, right, we disrupt that ability to take ukemi. Okay, again, right, not merely throwing, right. We're removing standing, and then we're removing rescue. It's an important distinction. It's one thing to execute the throw. It's a whole other thing to execute the throw or whatever the takedown is, and then disrupt his ability to save himself so that he can't turn things around on you once he gets there. So it is true. He can't do anything. He can't move, make corrections. Now he can, like if he can take ukemi and he takes ukemi early enough, most people, again, just like with kuzushi, right? Well, that's bending him. It's making him step or whatever, right? Most people count ukemi as the break fall once he hits the ground. But advanced ukemi attacks the person on the way down. So yeah, you threw me, you caused me to drop, or you tossed me over your shoulder or whatever. But the sooner in the chain I can take ukemi. Ukemi means receiving body, doesn't mean break fall. Again, another fucked up definition, right? The sooner I can neutralize the force of his attack, the force of that throw, whatever, and regain use of my body, I can't step. I'm going to have to roll out eventually, but I'm next to his body. Why not grab it? Why not hit it? Why not grab his weapon? Whatever, right? So if I'm learning how to do that as advanced stuff, then, and this is how this play goes back and forth. Tori uke, that kind of thing, right? The Tori learns a technique. The uke learns how to beat the technique. The uke learns how to do a throw. The uke learns how to do ukemi. Oh, shit. Now the Tori has to learn how to do the throw and disrupt the ukemi so the uke can't take it. Now the uke has to learn how to throw away forms, ukemi forms, official break falls, those kind of things. And when disrupted, learn how to minimize damage and immediately get out of that. So there's a recovery, there's a counter, there's a technique, there's a counter to the technique, there's a counter to the counter, there's a counter to the counter, there's a counter to the counter that, okay? This is why the path goes on. Okay. But either way, right? So this becomes problematic. Well, shit, right? The better he is, this guy that jumps me had even minimal training in judo, jujitsu, gymnastics, shit, even dance, or they're just a naturally flexible person. It's harder. It's not only harder to throw them, it's once you get it, it's harder to keep it. I just mentioned this to somebody earlier, I think earlier today. right? But we weren't talking about martial arts. We were talking about, I think I was talking about with my wife about somebody who's fucking trying to get into a relationship or whatever. And so they're doing all this stuff to get into a relationship, but getting into a relationship is not the same as maintaining one. Completely different skill sets, which is what fucks most people up, right? They're good at the shit talking to get into one, right? But then they gotta, oh shit, now I gotta maintain this. Okay? Well, that's not the same. Okay? Which is why people that maintained a relationship for a long time and then they lost a partner, divorce, death, whatever, right? And then they get back into the dating scene. They're trying to use the same skills that they used to maintain and nurture to get somebody's interest. Not the same skill set. Just like becoming a black belt and then wanting to teach. Not the same skill sets, which is why a lot of people suck at teaching. Okay? And I know that they suck at teaching and they know they suck at teaching. They just don't know what the indicator of the sucking looks like. What it looks like is poor student retention. What they do is blame the other people for not being committed enough to stay, when it's really they're either causing confusion or there's a shit ton of skills that are missing that causes people to want to stay. Right? In our instructor training program, we remove one of those structural problems, one of those positions of unbalance at the very, very beginning by letting people know that in every class that you teach, students are either one step closer to black belt or their next black belt or one step closer to the door. And the difference is in how you taught that class. And it has nothing to do with placating or making things easy or whatever. It's a completely different skill set. Okay? So most people believe that I have to be a black belt to teach. And once I get my black belt, I'm automatically qualified to teach. This fits in with what we're going to be covering next episode. Okay? How our own beliefs about things can be the crutch or the thing, the dependency that when it's not there, everything collapses. Like we can't move forward. We can't operate. And that brings us right here to where what we're talking about, right? Before you take balance, right? Keep your own, right? That's a basic lesson, right? Teachers used to remind us, right? Like, how difficult is it to throw someone else? Okay. We're learning the lessons, we're learning the skills, but you know what? It's really, really freaking difficult. Damn near impossible to throw somebody else. Okay. To break somebody else's balance when you're not balanced yourself. Simple. But it's a huge lesson. Okay? So, I mean, students may have everything working, right? In a technique like Osoto Nage, Ganseki Nage, that kind of thing, right? Think about this, right? In both of those techniques, in one, we're in kind of a kumiuchi. We could be starting in these things, but I pretty much stay in one for Osoto Nage, this rear outer reaping throw. And so just push on the shoulder, pull on the sleeve, whatever. I step through. In Ganseki, right, I catch their arm and then I turn to throw and whatnot. So they could have everything working at one point and then all of a sudden overstep this shoulder alignment, right? Or they could turn away from the shoulder where their arm ends up in line with the shoulders or behind it. Okay. That's what I mean by overstepping the shoulder line. Okay. They walk past their own structure and they break themselves. And that doesn't mean that they actually damage themselves, because the stronger somebody is, upper body, the less they're going to feel this. Okay. But the structure is broken. They've opened the joint and now the joint is in a position for reaching, right? not for load bearing. But either way, in this position, what has been broken, right? Most people, again, think that the person's stumbling, wobbling, going to fall down, whatever, right? But what happens is that the structure necessary for work to be done in that area, for these throws to be accomplished or whatever, right? It's not there. The joint's not in a position for doing work. That joint's in a position of kuzushi. Not because the shoulder's falling down. It's because the stability and structure necessary for that joint to do what needs to be done for these throws, it's misaligned. That's not there. Okay. So, like I said, they break themselves and then they wonder why they need force. Okay. The throw didn't fail at the end. It failed the moment they moved in a way that broke that shoulder line, that it put the body in a position where it couldn't do work. Okay, so it failed earlier. Most people see the fail when they lock up, or the person steps and catches himself, or they didn't even get taken off balance anyway. They like move in and Sensei, I can't even move him. Yeah. Why is that? It's not because he's like that much bigger than you. He must be very strong. Well, he's strong because he's stable. He's strong because what you're doing to him, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. Not you guys. You guys are all enlightened. So, but this isn't just a martial arts technique. As Hatsumi Sensei often said, he'd do something and he'd go, not just a good martial arts idea, good life idea. Right? Shui Sensei says it a different way. Seno Sensei used to say it. Oh, whatever. But anyway, let me just back up here just a bit, right? If your partner can take ukemi, if they can break fall, catch themselves, turn things around, the lesson from Hatsumi Sensei was don't let them fall. Break structure in a way where they cannot step. They can't. There's no need to recover, like with a step, because they can't even move their feet. Okay, this is where in past lessons we've talked about the goal behind like 90% of your techniques, right, is to use whatever body part you're striking or manhandling, right, to seize the spine, and if you do that right, you control the hips and immobilize the feet. And when that happens, even for an instant, if he cannot step, if he cannot contort, avoid, recover, whatever, it's like putting him in a vice. And you put something in a vice, you lock it down, not going anywhere. Okay? It's not like holding the board and then trying to saw it while it's freaking moving around in your hands and whatnot, right? You lock it down, and then whatever tool you're going to use, you can't go anywhere. Everything gets focused there, right? So the big lesson with the kuzushi is doing it in a way where he doesn't even fall down, because it's not always a good idea to let him fall, right? But here's a question. How often do people do this in life? How often do they overextend themselves? How often do they overcommit? How often do they break themselves trying to solve a problem? Same lesson. Okay? Before asking how to take another person's balance, ask whether or not you have your own. Okay? So before we make this shift, James, questions, comments, complaints? I have broad shoulders. I don't want any wild, crazy, stupid stuff. Like, what's popped up on things in the past. Maybe even now. You're really good at filtering stuff out.
Just Chris Pickin asked, does that moment in Kazushi tie into Kaname?
Does it tie into? Did you say Taname or Kaname?
Kaname.
Kaname is. It does, but Kaname is like the bolt in your in your hinge on a door, right? It's the point of strength that makes the whole thing work. To break someone's balance, and the scrolls are very clear about this, right? Kotoryu scrolls, Tagagi, Yoshin, I think. I mean, it's in all of them, but I'm trying to think about where it's explicit. You break 3 lines of balance at the same time or in succession so that the brain can't keep up. So each of those moves, each of those lines would have a kaname. Okay. So yeah, it's related. But the final one would be the last thing that he had to do any resisting or whatever with. So yeah, it relates. But I would say that there's a kaname in every move or in every movement. That's the linchpin. It's the key to breaking that, right? For beginners, when they're learning to break balance, right, the first thing that we teach is not the balance line, it's the power line. And for beginners, the power line is drawing a line from one foot to the other. Generally, we use the back of the heels. Okay, it's the Omote Gyaku principle. So if you know what the power line is, then you know where the balance line is, because the balance line for beginners bisects that. So if the power line, whatever it is, right? Bisecting it means we're going to make a plus sign. So if we bisect that line, front and back, that's their basic initial balance line. But we have to know what the power line is first. Right? And again, when I say this for beginners, this simplistic starting point, heel to heel, bisect it, make a plus sign, and then put an arrowhead on the end of that line, that tells you which way to move them, right? Again, it's the start, because let's say Osodonage, right? I can do that. I can apply that pressure to move them in that direction. The hell? To move them in that direction. But because it's only one line, their brain body system, right, will move a foot onto that line to catch itself. No conscious thought. This operates below conscious thought. Okay. Which is why when I do an Osotonage, what I'm feeling for, because I can't see it, right? This is why we move away from the sense of sight as our primary sense and move it to our sense of touch, sense of feel. Okay. Because especially in grappling situations, how much of him can I see? Can't see him. Can't see anything below my lower peripheral vision. I can't see the ground, right? Any of that stuff. So what I'm feeling for is the moment where that step begins, because in 150 to 200 milliseconds, that foot will touch down and his balance will be caught. So as soon as I feel that step occurring, I make my adjustment. What I need to know is what the new power line will be when that foot touches down. So break your Osotonage down. Start with where he is, and then do your push-pull so that the pushing hand moves in the direction, right, of that bisecting line. Okay. And then just play around with, like, getting him to take the step. Okay, because he's only off balance until his foot moves. Okay, what I need to know is where he will be when he gets where he's going. Okay, and so you'll get to know this, that wherever I start will create the new power line. So once you learn where your partner's foot lands, now from that heel to the one that didn't move because you're checking it, right? That's the new line. Okay. So as soon as I get that step to occur, I shift to the new line based on where he'll be when he gets where he's going. What that means is when his foot gets moved by his brain, it's right. It will land in the right spot to catch himself based on the initial balance break. But mid-step, I shift. What that does is makes him wrong when he lands. He was right when he started. He'll be wrong when he lands. And now multiple lines are broken and he's going to have a harder time recovering. And because I stay in motion and he's getting extended out, it becomes more and more difficult, if not impossible, for the body to fire any muscles that won't make the problem worse for him. Okay. So much so that he can hold on tighter, but when he holds on tighter, it pulls him off balance. When he stiffens up to stop the fall, that aggravates the throw, right? So it's not about what you're doing in the moment, right? Upper, intermediate, advanced stuff is about knowing where he will be when he gets where he's going, and I'm making my decision based on that, not based on where things are now. Okay. So the kaname, yes, it's related to it, but what destroys most people think it's a move. That's part of it, but it's when the move occurs. What angle does it occur on? That you can't at full speed, you can't think this fast, which is why you practice a lot and you learn what it feels like. Okay. What it feels like. You keep adjusting your angle, whatever. And again, that what the hell is that? Is that on my side, your side? What is that? It sounds like me coming through. Anyway, sorry. So when I say beginner thing, it's heel to heel and then bisect it, make a plus sign. That's assuming that the weight distribution on his legs is 50-50. That's why it's for beginners. It's easy. It's an easy math problem. It assumes 50-50. As the weight distribution changes and becomes 60, 70, 80, 90% on one leg and less on the other, that bisecting line changes. I have a Kuzushi worksheet that I did up to give to my students that has this differentiation kind of thing. And again, it's an expedient. You don't memorize it. You get the gist of it so that you can learn the feel, right? And learn to break things. This is actually in a version of Ichimonji no Kata in the Gyokuryu, and it's not grappling. You strike somebody in a direction that takes them off this. It's the same balance breaking. It's the same thing as if I were doing a throw, but it's done with a strike. It's done with the shuto. Okay. Again, learning the moves is just the beginning. Hopefully that helped. James, anything else? Yes, no, maybe. He's got this pensive look on his face.
No, nothing right now.
Okay, cool. All right. Back to the notes. Better than back to the Batcave. Anyway, okay. So here's where we move from Kuden descriptions into Kuden. And this is where we're trying to get into more of really understanding the principle. right? Not just a move. Okay. So let me take things a little bit further, right? If Kazushi is collapse of structure, can relationships collapse options, choices, decisions? Can dependency on whatever and in whatever way collapse freedom? Can support, help, partnerships, whatever, right? Aid. Can that become chains, cages, or traps waiting to spring on us? And that's a serious question. Right? Because what I'm leaning into, right, is another question, right? That question is, what am I leaning on without knowing it? That could actually be preventing me from being successful in whatever direction I'm trying to be successful. What am I leaning on that I'm afraid to lose? What am I leaning on that I'm dependent on, but not really thinking about? Relationships, roles, job titles, credentials, belt rank, approval, identity, external certainty. Okay? You know, one of the worst things I think that ever happened to kids, and it's been showing up for years, is the self-esteem movement that came out of the late 70s, where kids were being told that they could be anything they wanted when they grew up, which is bullshit. That doesn't mean that people don't have potential. It doesn't mean that the system is out to get them. Okay. But being anything, or they were told, you know, you can be anything you want as long as you worked hard enough. Okay, well, that brings a variable in, work ethic, and maybe another one, perseverance. But what about aptitude? Are you smart enough to do that thing? Are you willing, or do you have the interest in studying all the fucking school subjects that are going to be necessary to be smart enough to do that thing? What's your relationship to risk? Because some things look really cool. You might grow up to be president. Really? You know what kind of shit? Well, all you have to do is look at the news. What kind of shit do presidents take every day? And I don't give a shit which side of the aisle you're on or which era we're talking about or who's in or whatever, because there's always somebody on your side and there's always a bunch of people who don't want you to be there. It's easy to take advice and take all the cheering from the people that like you. Okay. But seriously, how many people would stay in that office if they took the same kind of shit every goddamn day and didn't fold? Or would they? I'd have told people to shove shit right up their ass a long time ago. You fucking do it. Right? All these people with great ideas. Right? Yeah. Everybody's got a great idea when they have no skin in the damn game. Right? Same thing with being teachers or, you know, making videos and putting stuff out to help people. These things. Whatever. Right? Read the comments. I do every once in a while. Sometimes they hire me. Sometimes they make me smile. Sometimes they make me laugh out loud. Right? But aptitude's a huge factor. Relationship to risk is a huge factor. And maybe it's not yours. If you're connected to somebody and you're really trying to work on something that's really big or life-changing or that would be awesome for you and the significant other that you have, how far are you going to go if their relationship to risk is way lower than yours? Okay. Or what you didn't know until after it was too late was that once you put the ring on or you signed the document or whatever, they were going to hand you a script or an unwritten script that was whatever you wanted to do, was okay with them as long as you told them and they gave you permission. So this whole you can be anything you want is bullshit. The sooner people get their head, and this is not defeatist. It just points to all the things that people don't think about or don't consider or are shielded from until it's too late when bullshit blanket statements like that come out. It's no wonder half the fucking country's on antidepressants and stuff and life's not going their way and adulting is too fucking difficult. Well, no shit. Let's just give them all these lessons that make it seem like all they have to do is want something hard enough or wish on candles and blow them out and sprinkle pixie dust and they're going to get whatever the hell they want. Just doesn't work that way. That's not pessimistic. It's not nihilistic. It's realistic. Right? But what are we leaning on? Right? Now, before somebody takes this too far and says that Sensei said, right? Don't get married, don't get into partnerships, don't like that. Okay. Sometimes support, help, or safety nets strengthen. Absolutely. Right? But sometimes they subtly own us without our knowing or realizing it. In this one, this episode, I'm talking about external forces. Don't worry, got you covered. Next episode, we're going to be talking about self-kuzushi. Okay? And perhaps, the most dangerous collapse comes from what we've been leaning on all along. Okay? And I teach all the time, so I don't know if I've done this recently in a class, on a Whiteboard Wednesday, and another Kuden or whatever. So if you've heard this before, it'll be a reminder. If you don't, or if you haven't, well, either way, I got to catch up the folks that are new. Okay, so we're going to take a little quick here walk around three concepts: dependence, codependence, and independence. We'll talk about this very, very briefly as it relates to freedom. Okay. So quick little exercise. I'll explain the way I do it in class, but I'll also give you a quick way to do it where you can just kind of use your hands at the moment to get the gist. Okay. So if you're driving or doing something around heavy machinery or whatever, don't do the exercise now. Okay. Don't even visualize it. Right. Stop what you're doing, pull over to the side of the road, whatever. Okay. That's my caveat, right? I don't need people walking off a pier or walking out into the traffic or whatever, like they did when they were playing the Pokemon Go game or whatever, and ignoring the warning at the beginning, whatever. We did this when I was a student. And so I just have my students do it, right? Because I think it's simple, but it's a really powerful and a really good way to describe these three things. Okay. Dependence, codependence, and independence. Okay. So what I have people do is stand across from each other in Shizen. And what they'll do is put their hands up, palm to palm, and then just kind of reach out until palms are touching. And then from there, both people have to do this at the same time. Otherwise, one or both of them are going to crash face first onto the ground. Okay. And then what they do is they slowly start walking their feet away from each other so that they end up, you can do this with the palms of your hands. Just put your palms facing each other, palm to palm, fingertips vertical, right? So your fingers are up, thumbs are pointing at you, and then just kind of lean the fingertips in against each other and make a tent. And then just slowly start to move your elbows and wrist out away from each other until you've got this really big A-frame going on. Okay. That's the position they end up in. Okay. Then I make them say things to each other. Like each one takes turns and looks at each other. And then they say, I trust you and I respect you. Okay. Now, people could believe that, but what if they say the opposite thing? I hate you. Okay, well, but see, this is codependence. Okay, both people are equally at risk, but this is a pretty strong position to be in because they're way out, right? No human body could be in that position without support. So cool, right? Trust you and I respect you, right? I trust you to not drop me, and I respect you enough to not drop you. Okay. But they're in this together. Okay. Whether they want to be or not, they're in this together. Okay. Now, bring them back up again, right? And then we'll do the same thing. Palms together, one person, and they'll take turns being in each position. One person will stand there in Shizen, and they're going to bear the load, while the other person walks their feet backwards. So again, palm to palm, one hand, lean those fingertips in against the other structure, and then only that elbow wrist, lean it out so you end up with this lean-to, not an A-frame, right? And in this position, okay? So now one person is in a precarious position. The other person is absolutely supporting them, okay? Now, again, in class, I have them take turns looking at each other, right? The person out in this leaning position will look up and say, I trust you and I respect you. And the person who's standing there holding them will say, I trust you and I respect you. Okay. Both people, whether they do or don't, there's a condition. Okay. This is dependence. The person who is leaning is in a far worse position, right? Because if the other person takes a step backwards, this person's going to fall on their face. In that codependent position, one or the other person may want out of that damn relationship. But what ends up happening is they usually stay unless they're willing to crash and burn as well. Their biggest problem and or resentment is, how do I get out of this? Because they may be okay with the other person falling flat on their face, but how do I do it without me falling? Shit. But in a dependent relationship, okay, this person may want out, but how do they do it? Right? Well, they've got to convince the other person to give them even more than support. They have to give them so much that they're on their own feet. But unless the dependency breaks, that person can't back up again because it just ends up in the same position. This person, the stable person, may want out, but we live in a society and a culture where, right? How strong are you to put up with peer pressure, family pressure, all that kind of stuff? Because you know what this person needs is motivation. And so if I start taking a step back or half a step back or whatever, and it gets precarious, or I just flat out tell them, in a minute, I'm going to step back and you're going to fall on your face, or you're going to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet. Right. But now you're the bad guy. Right. So there's all kinds of shit going on here. Right. But in marriages, right, not the ones where people have this false sense of 50-50 relationships, right? Because I think you got to be together long term to be able to look back and go, yeah, it's 50-50. But on any given day, right, one person could be at 10%, 40%, 80%, whatever, and the other person's, at 100% or whatever. Okay, so 80%, we're probably still okay, right? But one person could be ill, injured, exhausted from work or whatever. So on that day, it's not 50-50, right? My wife and I don't even look for that kind of thing. Okay. Because it's just understood that if one person is, the other person's going to make up for it, because there's going to be another day where it's just the opposite. Okay. Broke my back, or, she injured herself, whatever. Right. And so it works out. Okay. But here's the difference, okay? I'll also have the students stand in Shizen, walk up, put their hands palm to palm, okay? And not do anything. They just both standing in Shizen. They can look across at each other and say, I trust you and I respect you, okay? So with your palms, it's just this way, right? Okay? This is independence. Neither person is being forced to say what they're saying. Neither person has to say it. Neither person is obligated to stay there. But either person or both people can choose to engage in a dependent or interdependent relationship strategically. Only the independent person can enter dependence or interdependence strategically, willingly, right? And it's because they can reset, exit, or continue by choice, not pressure, at any time. That's freedom. The trapped person cannot do that. Okay. So strategically, I know what position I'm in, but we're working together for a common goal. I know what position I'm in. Okay. You're going to need some help. My wife had surgery, or you're going to need some help until, right, you're back on your feet. And then, we're both doing our thing and whatnot. But I'm going to need to extend more energy into the us thing, right? Because, right, I don't want the dogs jumping on you. I don't want you straining things, popping sutures, whatever. Cool. Okay. So, but the reason ours is strong and the reason I say that is because we're both independent people and we're choosing to be in what we're in for strategic reasons, for whatever. But even though we have a legal document, right, called a marriage, we both know that either one is free to walk in any time. That's scary to a lot of people, but we have no reason to go anywhere. So there's never the problem of feeling stuck or trapped. Okay. That's freedom. Okay? So now again, right, I have to keep this balanced, right? So kuzushi doesn't occur in other people's minds. So that people don't think that I didn't just like knock certain things or not, whatever. Okay. Let's be very, very clear. Okay. Dependence and codependence are not evil. They're not the problem. Let's just talk about dependency because I don't want to get this overly convoluted and we're almost done. Right. So dependence, we'll just talk about dependence. Dependence is not the problem. Teams rely on it. Marriages and partnerships work because of it, right? All kinds of things, right? So dependence isn't the issue. The inability to leave at will is. And that too may be a kind of kuzushi because it's a collapse of options. Okay? The removal of a necessary part. Remember, we translated kuzuzu, right? Kuzushi. The removal of a necessary part of what we need to be successful, to train, to finish or start projects, whatever. Okay? It's kuzushi. May not feel like it because we don't feel off balance. Or perhaps we're not aware enough of our condition, kamae, to be able to feel or sense or recognize either the unbalance or the dependence on a structure that's not my own, that I have to hope and pray never slips, breaks of its own accord, or goes away. Also known as a crutch. Okay? And this applies in the dojo too. Okay? This is not artificial. The dojo is not artificial. Okay? I know lots of people use it as an escape. Okay? But a true teacher should not, and a good one doesn't make themselves indispensable. Right? He or she should help their students stand of their own accord. Okay? Not just teach techniques or whatever, teach them how to self-correct, teach them how to self-manage, teach them how to apply this stuff all the time, not be dependent on them. Are they in the beginning? Sure, just like children are dependent on their parents. Okay. But even if it's just the ability to self-diagnose in the teacher's absence, we just talked about this recently during an episode, right? Otherwise, like if they're not doing that, what's being cultivated, right? Is it dependence or is it freedom? Okay? I deliberately make statements that I know are wrong to students, right? I'll say something, they'll be making a mistake, and I'll go, "Oh yeah, yeah, keep doing X, Y, Z," right? I do it to see whether or not the student's listening, if they're thinking strategically. Okay? I did this in class recently, and when the student kept doing the thing, right, I called him on it, right? And again, this is not a judgment thing. This was a learning experience. I never want my students to feel like, they're being attacked or whatever. Of course, that's going to depend on their personality type and their sensitivities and whatnot. Luckily, this guy's he's strong, right? So he gets it. He definitely wants to learn. So, but I did this right in class, and they kept doing the thing, and I went, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, you said," and I said, and even another student chuckled, and I said, "That was to point out the mistake, right?" And I said, "You just always going to do what I say, no matter what?" And he goes, "Yeah, I learned this a long time ago. You never question the sensei, right? Sensei's always right." Holy shit, right? I'm like, dude, I'm going to do the same thing to you to Hatsumi Sensei did, right? I will lie to you, right? How else can a teacher check to see if you're actually paying attention, if you're actually thinking strategically, or if you're just a blind disciple? You're just going to do whatever, right? Because if the teacher is always right, if you never question sensei, that's not understanding, right? That's surrender, right? Because if a teacher is always right, well, then why bother training perception? Why train strategy, right? Worship asks the teacher to think for me. Reverence asks the teacher to help me think more clearly. Reverence, right? Respectful attitude. Okay. Huge difference. Okay. And one of these things may become hidden bondage. Right. Now, again, just to be clear, right? This is not about any particular student. This isn't about like students being right or wrong, or even the student coming in with this. It wasn't a predetermined, it was a pre-programmed belief system. I'll talk about those next time. Okay. Not his fault. I mean, now that he's learned differently, if he continues on with it, it will be, but it wasn't his fault, right? To stay in that environment with that teacher in that context. Blind obedience? Ooh. To me, that speaks of the teacher, not of the student. Okay. So again, it's not a judgment thing, right? It was and still is a lesson, right? It's an opportunity for learning. Okay. And breaking those chains that bind. That's the important part. Okay. So again, support, right? Others being there to help, right? When things aren't going well, when they're struggling, right? Positive, right? Can also be medicine. It can be a good thing, right? In Mikyo, right? We have this concept of the Sangha, right? It's the group of fellow practitioners that, and also seniors and instructors and whatnot, that are there, right? To help, right? Through struggles and with understanding and whatnot, because only people in the same in the same pursuit, in the same where they're all trying to learn the same thing, they've all got the same goal and whatnot. They're the ones that can only truly understand what kind of difficulties you're going through, help you through things, those kind of things, right? It's not it's not the outsider going, oh, suck it up, right? Or you're the one that wanted to be meditation boy, whatever, right? So that kind of group, right? Within the dojo, the student body, right? Especially the core group of serious students, right? That's a sangha. It's a collective community of fellow practitioners there to support each other, right? So sangha matters. Dojo, as Hatsumi Sensei has defined dojo, right? Matters. Fellow travelers matter. Okay. But just like with all medicine should restore strength, not become another chain. Okay? Not something that makes us dependent on it always being there. Right? It's a really important distinction. I have to use this in class a lot too, where especially during our formal testing, right? A student will do something and then look over at the testing table, right? For like validation. Or they'll do something, or they'll do something in class and then look over. I see people do this in Japan all the time. They'll do something and then look to see if sensei's looking. If he was and there was something to be corrected, I'm sure I'll correct it, right? But worrying about whether you're being looked at, right? Thumbs up or judged or whatever. Okay. But when students do that in class, right? I'll look over at them and go, what are you looking at me for? Your partner's right there. The attacker is right there. If I were him, every time you looked at me, I'd punch you. Okay? Well, I want to make sure I'm doing it right. I haven't stopped you or told you that you're doing it wrong. Okay. This is even worse than somebody distracting you while you're trying to defend yourself. This is you distracting yourself, right? But what's it a sign of? It's a sign of a need for validation. It's a dependency on somebody else telling you whether it's right or not. You can't tell if it's working or not while you're doing your technique. Okay. So what I say is, look, if you're ever attacked, I'm not going to be behind the Chevy in the parking lot yelling at you, hey, don't forget, come on, do this one, do that. That I'm not going to be there. And if I am there, I promise I won't be yelling at you from behind the Chevy. I'll help. Okay. So stop. People can get into this little thing and not even know they're doing it. Well, they know they're doing it, but they don't know the consequences. Because to keep looking at the teacher to make sure you're doing it right, that's not independent thinking. So there's something going on in there, a fear of doing it wrong, a fear of being judged, a fear. I mean, if you could already freaking do it right, why the hell are you in class with that teacher? Personally, I've learned to always, if I'm going to be in a group, I should be the least knowledgeable person in that group. As a matter of fact, I've joined groups where like there's a little bit of fear going on that they could drop my ass at any moment. Okay. Because I would never want to be the top person in any given group, which is why I have other mentors outside of this thing, right? Because the top person isn't growing and everybody's dependent on the top person to tell them what to do. I want to be the low man on the totem pole because I have lots of growing to do. And I'm in a group of people who can do shit that I cannot. So there's no room for arrogance and there's only room for growth. They all have something to teach me. But that's different, right? So again, this episode is the Omote side, right? Surface level, the front facing, the obvious, right? The easy to see part of this concept, right? It's visible entanglements, support systems, relationships, right? Even our teacher and the art itself becoming chains, crutches, or even cages, right? But there's another side. Okay. Some chains bind from the outside. We've been looking at some of those. Others, we forge ourselves. Okay. Fear, avoidance, hidden prisons. I used the term before, what we might call self-kuzushi. Okay. And that's the focus of next episode. Okay. So just to kind of round this out, and I'll open it up to last minute questions or comments or whatever. Perhaps Kuzushi is not merely taking balance in its full sense. Perhaps it's recognizing anything that causes freedom, that causes options, causes integrity to collapse, to put us in a position where we can't move the way we need to, or at all, right? We can only hope that the collapse isn't a full-on crash and burn. And perhaps the warrior asks not only what threatens me, but asks, what am I leaning on that may collapse beneath me? Right? What position have I put myself in? Or what have I not considered thoroughly enough that if it was gone tomorrow, things would not just go sideways. All or part of my world would collapse. This happens to people all the time. I'm leaving you. Here are papers. We don't have we can't sustain your position anymore. Thanks for being a valued employee, but we have to let you go. Grandma died. Whatever, right? And you can tell that people never gave it any consideration because of the amount of trauma they experience when it happened. There's a collapse. Soul, mind, family, life, whatever. They had no idea that there was this structure that they were dependent upon that was external, but it was the internal belief or dependency that they never saw that allowed that structure to create a problem. And perhaps this is why we mustn't become hypnotized by only the visible side of training as well. The moves, the kata, because like the flame or bright light that attracts the moth, right? Hypnotizing it, burning it and killing it, right? Or if it doesn't kill it, it causes it to waste its entire life circling this bright, shiny stuff, right? Because like moths to a light or flame, many students spend a lifetime circling techniques, skills, cool moves, right? Never reach the source behind the flashy stuff, behind the light. Techniques can attract. We all know that, right? That's why the technique videos online have way more fucking views than things like this, especially in the martial arts world, right? Techniques can attract, but principles transform. Cool moves, they can fascinate, right? They can draw interest. But principles, yeah, they liberate. They create the freedom. Because it's the structure beneath that make things work. Right? The obvious attracts the eye. But the hidden governs the outcome. Okay? And that may be one of the deeper lessons of Kuzushi. Takamasu Sensei said, the secret of taijutsu is to know the foundations of peace. hell does that have to do with anything, Sensei? Okay, well, if we're only worrying about self-protection and survival and reestablishing peace, right? When somebody's trying to beat, break, or kill us, perhaps we miss something, right? Jack Hoban, one of the seniors in our art, when asked by a Marine in boot camp, he was demonstrating taijutsu and showing a lot of these things that the guys could use on a battlefield. But Jack was telling jokes and you know, just being a very personable person. And this Marine was like, how do you reconcile that? Right? Reconcile what? How do you reconcile like having all of these like killer moves, but loving your family, kissing your kids and hugging your wife and being a force for peace and change and all that kind of stuff? And he said it's really simple. Right? It comes from balance. Because ultimately, we all want to live a peaceful, calm, happy life. But we all also want to have the skills necessary that if something happens, we can deal with it coldly, quickly, and professionally, so that we can get back to that peaceful, powerful life that we've built for ourselves. And I believe this side of Kuzushi belongs to that. So it's just a suggestion from a guy who has a podcast that you chose to show up for. But maybe don't just study the visible side of things. Study what hides beneath them. This is often where the real art begins. So next week, next episode, part 2, right? We're going to take a look at the shadow side of Kuzushi, right? I know this whole thing is about hidden stuff, but this was the Omote. Next time, the Ura. Okay? So let's open things to any last minute questions, comments, right? An invitation that, you know, if you want to discuss your training more or you want to reach out for anything else, you can always shoot us an email, right? warriorc@warrior-concepts-online.com. And in the subject line, just put, you know, call request, that kind of thing. Don't be like, I'm not going to be discussing Naruto or any other kind of bullshit, right? In your email body, you're going to tell me about yourself, your training background, what your goals are, where things, you know, what your goals are, right? Where you're focusing on. Okay. And then, you know, well, also let me know what kind of days and times you have available for about a 30, 45 minute call, if it goes that long. Okay. But where we can discuss your goals, I'll answer any kind of questions that you have, and tell me where you are with given things. And then with at least one skill set, I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions for moving to the next level and the next one after that. Regardless, right? I mean, if you want to discuss training options or whatever, we can discuss those. If not, the biggest thing that would need to come out of that, one is you getting next steps. The second thing is, even if we were to consider a teacher-student relationship or even a helpful relationship, is this a good fit? Okay. Is it a good fit? Okay. And I'll be the first one to tell you if I think I'm not your guy. Right. So I'm not here fishing for students, but I'm open to it. Right. So therein lies that. James, questions, comments? Do you have any? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot. Any questions, any comments?
No, I don't have anything. The only thing that's coming is Dave said relationships definitely collapse options, even when they are good and healthy ones.
Indeed. Which is why they should be, and it's nothing against love or anything like that. But there is a reason that arranged marriages last longer than most others, no matter what we think of them. Go figure, right? There's nothing against love. My wife and I, really deep love, a lot of respect, but the relationship was entered into strategically. Because it really is true. She has her life. I have my life. We have an us life. So there is a her, there is a him, and there is an us. A lot of people collapse into there is no more her or him. There's only us. Or one got collapsed into us and the other one still gets to do things. Go figure. But anyway, is what it is. Okay. The question is, how do we regain balance? Anyway, what else? That's it? That was it?
That's it.
So I either put them to sleep, made them drool, made brains or heads explode or whatever. Okay, fair enough. All right, so next week we're going to take a look at those inner things. We're also going to take a look at fears and things like that that can present as virtues, because we can't fix it if we can't see it, but we also won't fix it if we think that it's a strength. Okay. This is a really, really strong structure. As long as the wood doesn't rot. Right? Or the weather conditions change or whatever. Okay. This is a strong structure. Okay. This structure, sorry, for the audio only, the codependent positioning, right? I'm just leaning my fingertips against each other, creating that lean to. Really strong structure. As long as the materials are right? There's no cracks, whatever. Okay. The dependent structure, I got one hand leaning against the other one, right? It's a strong structure. As long as that support holds out, right? This lean in thing here, it's not too much. It doesn't become too much. It doesn't get heavy or whatever. Because over time, I mean, the upright here, this one, it's not about it being upright. The roots have to be really, really deep. Just like in skyscrapers, the support beams that are above ground, there's what? Half of that length, a third to half of that length or more, subterranean. They didn't put all those parking levels down there just to be nice. They put it down there as a part of the structure and to use the space because they had to put the friggin' pilings down that far anyway. Okay. So they're strong as long as conditions are what they need to be for that to be useful. But in any case, the only ones that can enter into those are the strategically are the ones who and can exit at will, use them as needed, let them dissolve, that kind of thing, that have the actual freedom are independent ones. That doesn't mean single. That doesn't mean alone. Okay. So anyway, I talked long enough to give people a chance to pop anything else in. Anything else, James?
No, sir.
All right. Well, in that case, we will go ahead and wrap this one up. Another one for the thing. But remember, this is part one of a 3-part mini series on going deeper into this hidden side of Kuzushi. Okay. So hopefully I'll see you again next week. If I don't, I understand. Right. We'll leave it at that. But either way, that's it. We will see everyone either in class, Whiteboard Wednesday, or next week on Kuden.